Shalom from Jerusalem. This is TV7's Israel at War update. And as we're set to deliberate the latest developments here in Israel, with chief focus, of course, on the northern theater, where Israel is at war, high-intensity war vis-a-vis the Iranian proxy Hezbollah, it's always important to remember how this war began. 357 days ago, on October 7th of last year, the Islamist Hamas launched an onslaught on southern Israel, declaring war by perpetrating a massacre, murdering some 1,200 mostly civilians, wounding over 4,800 others, and kidnapping 246 people, including elderly, men, women, children, and infants. 101 of them remain in Hamas captivity to date. The subsequent day, on October 8th of last year, Iran essentially joined the war by greenlighting its proxy in Lebanon, Hezbollah, to launch cross-border attack against Israel. Since then, this Iranian proxy has launched over 9,300 munitions toward Israeli territory, and not Hezbollah alone. Additional proxies from Syria, from Iraq, as well as from Yemen have launched their own projectiles towards Israel, as well as Iran proper, when it launched over 300 projectiles between the night of the 13th and 14th of April earlier this year. Let's now turn to our TV7 editor-at-large, Mr. Amir Oren. Amir, what can you update us with on the latest?
So millions of Israeli civilians were awakened overnight, some 40 minutes after midnight, by the air raid, or more accurately, the missile raid sirens. And it turned out that it was a ballistic missile launched by the Houthis from Yemen. And this was an exception to the rule, where only the specific neighborhoods where the impact is about to take place are awakened by the siren. And it turned out that even though the Israeli control stations figured out that the missile will, if at all, only hit a specific location, there was some fear that the interceptor missile debris could fall virtually everywhere or anywhere in central Israel. So it was just a 10-minute alarm, 10-minute nuisance, and most Israelis went peacefully back to sleep. However, the overriding news, as you mentioned, comes from the northern front, or from the diplomatic headquarters behind the northern front. There is the American-French initiative, backed by many other countries, Saudi Arabia, the Emirates, the United Kingdom, the European Union, and several others, which calls for cessation of hostilities for 21 days, in which time there will be negotiations on removing Hezbollah north of the Litani, as per UN Security Council Resolution 1701 from 2006. And at the same time, there will be renewed efforts to gain a similar ceasefire plus a hostage release deal in Gaza. Prime Minister Netanyahu initially said that he did not sign off on the deal, later rectified it to say that he was aware of it, but he is awaiting to see what comes out of it. So basically, this is the end of a diplomatic week, but also one in which Israel pummeled Hezbollah. There are Israeli fighter planes high above Lebanon, and each time a missile is launched, immediately these planes or others who get their cues from these planes are out to destroy the launcher. Over the last week, there were several Israelis who were injured, but none was killed either in Lebanon or in Gaza.
Indeed. Of course, it's very important to highlight that Israel continues to face ongoing barrages of projectiles, different types of projectiles, different type of munitions from Lebanon towards Israeli territory, northern Israel in particular. But before that, let's turn to Washington, D.C., where we're joined by Ms. Zineb Ribois, a research fellow at Hudson Institute and the manager of the Center for Peace and Security in the Middle East. It's good to see you, Zineb. I'd like to
Thank you for having
focus
me.
for a moment. It's always a pleasure having you. I'd like to focus a moment on the Yemeni front, since they decided to launch this projectile, the ballistic missile, after Hezbollah announced that a targeted killing that Israel conducted in the Dahya of Beirut of a senior official of Hezbollah, namely the commander of the air units or the missile units of Hezbollah, used to serve Ansar Allah, which is dominated by the Houthi tribe, of course, for the past 10 years as a senior advisor, and was one of their coaches on how to shoot those missiles in the first place. So this was their dramatic response to this targeted killing. Uh, what should we take out of it, and how should we interpret those activities? Can we expect the Houthis to up their game unless Israel does something more decisive against them?
Absolutely. I do 100% believe that the Houthis have been empowered. But I would also add that something more interesting happened recently where Iran brokered secret talks between Russia and the Houthis to transfer anti-ship missiles. And this is extremely important because it means that they are going to receive not only drones, disruptive military capabilities from Iran, but they are also going to receive now more support from Russia, given that by disrupting shipping in the Red Sea, they are serving a purpose, and they are serving something that both Russia and Iran are aligned on, which is to basically erode U.S. posture on the Red Sea. And so, if Israel takes action, it might take action in terms of weakening the Houthis, making sure they do not reach Israel, and so on. However, it's a bigger problem since it's the United States that needs to modify its foreign policy, because by not tackling Iran, which is the fuel to all those proxies, whether it's whether it's the Houthis, Hezbollah, or Hamas, as long as Iran remains untouched, the Houthis are going to continue. And I think this is really how they've been operating, and it's extremely important since they are not only targeting Israel, they're also weakening other U.S. allies such as Egypt and Saudi Arabia. So I think the fact that Russia is now part of the game is definitely empowering the Houthis. But for that, the United States should also take action.
Indeed. Let's now turn to Central Israel, where we're joined by Colonel in Reserve Miri Eisen, formerly a senior officer at the IDF Intelligence Directorate, an advisor of the Prime Minister's office, so on and so forth. Currently a senior fellow at the ICT at Reichman University. It's good to see you, Colonel. I'd like to ask you to give us a little bit of a two cents on the regional perspective, since the Russians are, at least vocally so, have been very deliberate in their intentions to counter the United States wherever they may be. And the move vis-a-vis the Houthis is just one of many of those activities. Nevertheless, on the northern front, we do see them very much active in Syria, where they have, of course, a permanent presence, both in Latakia, where they have a long-time air base, as well as in Taltus, where they have a long-time naval base. They have deployed in those areas both very potent electronic warfare capabilities, as well as their most advanced S-400 surface-to-air system that pretty much covers the entire state of Israel. And therefore, the ongoing collaboration or coordination between Israel and Russia vis-a-vis Syria in particular has to do with deconfliction to avoid unnecessary conflict. Nonetheless, to what degree is Russia involved when we're talking about Hezbollah, since it is a terror organization that is not only reliant on Iranian munitions, but also on Russian munitions, on different types of systems that they have utilized in past wars and past conflicts quite robustly.
Not only have they done what you've described, Jonathan, but the Russians themselves, they're not just playing a double game or a triple game. Russia is looking towards the United States, but Russia is a long-term with a very strong status in the Middle East, not just in Syria and with the different actors. And I'm worried in that sense about if Russia sends weapons, for example, to Syria's Bashar Assad, it's as if a sideshow, but anything that goes to Syria's Bashar Assad can end up in Hezbollah hands. We've seen, not just over the last week, but over the last decade, Israel has constantly tried to stop the main flow of weapons into Lebanon, into Hezbollah's hands, and Lebanon goes through that Syrian gateway. So let's add into the regional players that we're not talking about Bashar Assad right now. What is he doing there as the gateway? He is most definitely allowing the Russians to do whatever they want. And we have that long road route. If you want to go by not by plane, rather by land, you're going to go from Lebanon through Syria, through Iraq to get to Iran. And we're talking about the flow of weaponry into Hezbollah. So in that regional play, as I look at it right now, Israel has diplomatic ties with Russia. Israel has a direct flight right now. When you go into the Israeli airport, where so many places you can't fly to, you can't fly to Moscow. It's one of those odd aspects of where we live right now. But hand in hand, that same Russia is the one supplying not just Hezbollah directly, but through Syria's Bashar Assad and, of course, through the Islamic regime of Iran. We're getting all of that weaponry that goes down to the Houthis, to Hezbollah in Iraq, Hezbollah in Lebanon, and, of course, Shiites in Syria. So here we are, surrounded by them all. I don't know that in diplomacy what that means is now Israel has to be the one that makes big changes. But I'd like to highlight to our allies, to the United States, to Europe, to the UK, that all of the talks about doing things against Israel is empowering and enabling Russia, Iran, we haven't even mentioned China, that are supplying and helping both Iran directly, Syria, Bashar Assad through Iran, and all of the different proxies that get all of their weaponry between Russia, Iran, and of course China.
Indeed. Well, it's of course it goes without saying that Russia is playing masterfully when we're talking about the Middle East, and everybody are taking it into account, except for the Americans apparently at this point in time, since they don't take them seriously over for a few reasons, but we'll put those things aside for now. Mr. Owen, yesterday we heard the commander of the Israeli Air Force highlight that what used to be the campaign between the wars, which Miri referred to when we're talking about the interception of any projectiles or munitions transferred through Syria into Lebanon for the sake of arming Hezbollah, will now become part of the equation for this war. And therefore, are we expected to see a robust campaign by Israel against those Iranian militias, Iraqi militias, according to various reports, even the Yemenites, talking about Ansar Allah, of course, trying to get through Syria towards Lebanon? Will Israel strike them directly?
So Major General Tomer Bar, who grew up in a village adjacent to the Ramat David air base, which Hezbollah has been trying to hit by missiles and rockets unsuccessfully so far, has personally took part in one of the sorties in Lebanon. It's a rare case indeed, where such a high-ranking officer gets permission from his own superiors to participate in a combat sortie because of all the repercussions if anything happens to him. So he knows firsthand, of course, also through intelligence, what the problem is. Now, in earlier discussions of ceasefire proposals decades ago, let's take the 1970 war of attrition between Israel and Egypt. The loophole, which was unfortunately left, was the so-called standstill clause. What happens after the guns go silent for a while? And the Egyptians, with the Soviets, the Russians of the time, used it in order to move forward their surface-to-air missile batteries. Here, what General Barr and his pilots are doing, they are striking the transportation of munitions from Syria to Lebanon. Of course, they do not originate in Syria. As you mentioned, it could be Russia, Iran, or other places, but the through shipment is the Syrian Lebanese border. By the way, it's only a 3-hour drive from Damascus to Beirut. And if you're in a hurry, much less. So the real question is, if there are serious ceasefire talks between Israel and Lebanon being a cover for Hezbollah, is there going to be a prohibition against the resupply of Hezbollah by outside forces? Because if it does, Israel would obviously not agree to any such deal.
Indeed. For the time being, there's not going to be any ceasefire. And at least from the people I've been speaking to, the fact of the matter is there was a technical glitch on the American side from a communication between the Prime Minister's office and the White House in which they deliberately stated that they would make a public statement about this deal right before Netanyahu was supposed to get on the plane towards New York for the UN General Assembly. That didn't work out, and therefore the public statement about this proposal came out during the flight, which did, to the surprise of many, it brought up people like Yair Lapid, like the leader now of the Labour Party, Yair Golan, who formerly served also as the deputy chief of general staff of the IDF, to say 21 days is a gift to Hezbollah that cannot be done. The best ceasefire should entail 2 to 3 days at most. If this is not acceptable, continue fighting. And this is something that Netanyahu, of course, now cannot accept anything at a time when the opposition, which is supposedly the allies of the Biden administration in Washington, basically cut him under. So he's in a very precarious position. Israel is in a very precarious position. And I think that this proposal is dead to begin with, since Hezbollah is also, even though very much interested in a long-term deal, it will only do so if it helps it in one way or another, strategically or otherwise. But Zainab, when we're talking about the broader picture, where is Iran in this whole story? Of course, we hear the rhetoric about where they decide to attack if necessary in the event that Israel would go into a full-scale war. But all Hezbollah is doing is at Iran's behest, and it is calling the shots via the Islamic Revolutionary Guards, is it not?
Yes, absolutely. Well, while I do think that Israel is restoring deterrence in the Middle East by weakening Hezbollah, I still think that that Iran is scoring some very important political gains. I do make the distinctions between these military gains and political gains, and it seems that for Iran right now, the major goal and a major and it has been their ambition since the start is to get nuclear weapons. And so far, they are very, very close. This is something that Secretary Antony Blinken said, that this is a lot. Many national security advisors have raised the alarm that Iran is actually getting closer, and they are watching Hezbollah, Houthis, other proxies weaken U.S. posture, distract everyone, especially in the Middle East, with the Muslim audiences, by dominating the Palestine question, while it is pushing towards the acquisition of nuclear weapons. I think that this should be the priority at the White House. Make sure that Iran does not get nuclear weapons. Make sure that Israel gets all the support it needs to weaken Iranian proxies. Because at the end of the day, for now it seems that it's really a game of which proxy we're weakening. Today it's Hezbollah, tomorrow it's the Houthis, and so on. It's a never-ending game, and this is what Iran wants, so that it can achieve its national security objectives.
Indeed. Well, Miri, I'd like to ask you particularly on the fact that there were so many countries vying for a ceasefire the moment Israel started its defensive maneuver against Hezbollah, to include countries such as Germany, which has stood steadfast by Israel since the beginning of the blatant aggression by the Islamist terror group Hamas on October 7th. It's very supportive in all activities against Hezbollah and all activities throughout the region, basically. It has launched also or deployed various frigates to the Red Sea in support of defensive operations, and not only Germany. I'm talking also, of course, about Australia, about Canada, about the United States itself, about the UK, France, Italy. You're looking at all those countries and you're asking themselves, or I'm asking myself, what is their strategic angle? We are in an age of strategic power competition. China and Russia have just launched a major joint naval exercise that was the largest in scale since the Cold War. We're seeing the Iranians launching massive naval exercises, which are, of course, hollow as in comparison to what the Russians and Chinese do. But all of the various activities, be it in the Horn of Africa all the way to the Pacific, is this the time to block something that may weaken the adversary at such a crucial point in history?
Not only is it a crucial point in history for us, Jonathan, here we are sitting right now inside Israel, and what I have been hearing from the world, and as you said before, we're on day 357, we're almost at 1 year of this war. What I'm hearing is not just that the world, the Western world, the democratic world, is tired of this war, but that they want it to kind of disappear, mainly from my point of view, because in every single one, in a different way, it affects the domestic public. This war has been feeding domestic issues inside different countries. Many of these countries now have different types of elections coming out. The United States is the one, but having been United States and Canada in different European countries, to me, it's appalling and shocking that Israel here in the Middle East, defending itself inside the Middle East, is right now becoming a bone of contention throughout these different Western democracies, sort of as in, you, Israel, end this war so that we inside our other democracies can calm down our domestic fronts. And to me, that's hiding behind the Israeli, it's not our Israeli might, it's our resilience in the fact that we're already withstanding this multi-front war for almost a year. And not only that, but looking into the near future, and when I say near future, I mean till the end of 2024, I think we're going to be in this war at least until the end of 2024, which means that our resilience is being put on the line here for all of these countries that are looking, from my point of view, at each one at their own domestic audience.
May I
Mr.
look
Owen,
at it from another angle, Jonathan?
Go ahead. You have 30 seconds for that.
If everyone could be certain that the Israeli strikes against Hezbollah would be the end of it, Washington would have been satisfied. Their concern is that it would flare up and become a regional war in which Americans would be hurt, America's allies and partners around the region would be hurt, and therefore they would like to put a firewall between what is happening and the larger issues.
I'd like to push back on that and say that, yes, they are afraid of a regional conflagration, but Americans were hurt. What happened at T-22? What happened in Iraq time and again? We're talking about dozens of Americans wounded over the past year in Syria and Iraq and Jordan. To put this in context, I understand that the Biden administration is wary of the consequences of a wide-scale escalation in the region, but I think that the Iranians are blowing a lot more hot air than what they're capable to bring to the table. When we're talking about strong power, they have invested vastly in an arsenal delivered to their proxies throughout the region, but they are far from capable, as Colonel Joel Rayburn always says. It's a country without an air force, without air defense. What is it worth? So we'll put this one moment aside. What are we to expect for the next weekend? Briefly from each of you, at least a sentence and a half. Go ahead, Mr. Olin.
We have to see what the reactions are going to be, both for Prime Minister Netanyahu's speech at the UN General Assembly and for the expected reduction in Israel's rating, credit rating by the Moody's firm.
Ms. Zineb?
I do think I'm especially watching Horn of Africa right now, so I'm expecting more escalation between Ethiopia and Somalia. It is very worrisome since more instability in the Red Sea means more Iranian interference, so that they can put more pressure on Egypt and other countries. So this is something very much looking. I'm very much watching.
We are very much closely monitoring the situation, absolutely. Colonel Eisen?
I expect in the next few days to hear the Israeli, both military and political levels, with what I'm going to call the war drums. I think that we are going to be talking here extensively about an upcoming ground operation inside Lebanon against Hezbollah, against their capabilities, and that is going to overwhelm the Israeli media in the upcoming days.
Thank you, Colonel Eisen, Ms. Ribois, and Mr. Olin for all of your insights. I'd like to thank all of you at home as well, and also highlight tonight we will air Powers in Play, our monthly edition. I will join that panel, as well as I'd like to seize this opportunity to highlight that TV7 Israel is a donation-based nonprofit ministry. Therefore, if you are blessed by our productions and would like to help support the programs, which are exclusively donation-based, please go to our website at www.tv7israelnews.com and prescribe a donation. I'm Jonathan Hessen, wishing you a Shabbat Shalom Mevorach Vebatuach, and until our next update.